A&M that sells like actual Under Armour jersey apparel. It's an NIL store apparently. I bet they're gonna have some pretty new stuff. I'm gonna hopefully go this weekend and take a look and see.
You see a Donaldson jersey and call me about my boy.
Make it 2.
I'll think about it.
Christmas present.
Hey, you can check on your end if it's live, if you see it, but we should be live now.
Man, I had all kinds of problem getting back into my Gmail trying to Donaldson jersey and call me about my boy.
Oh yeah, we're live.
I hear it.
Good. We'll give it just a minute to see if anybody shows up, and then we'll get started. Little later start, but that's all right.
Hey, when we've got New York hosts, you gotta be late night. I'm on Eastern time with you guys for this one.
Yeah, did I see you're in DC right now?
No, I wish. I'm in Morristown, Tennessee.
Oof.
Yeah.
No offense to the locals who might be listening.
Where's Sonny Smith from? You over in that area?
We'll cut all this from the podcast. This is only here for the live folks.
We're not recording for the pod yet, so
yeah.
Safe on that end.
Sean sees us. All right.
Sean's my guy. Shout out Sean.
Sorry for the late start, Sean.
If you need copiers or machines for your business, Sean's your guy. A to Z office resource. Free plug. People could watch this later actually. So there you go.
Oh, and you think about that. All right. You want to get started?
Yeah. Ready?
Let's go for it.
All right. 3, 2. Oh wait, Jackson, you're gonna have to. You're hosting, so I'm gonna send a request. You have to accept it.
All right.
Ready?
Cool. All right, guys, we are back. It has been a long off season. We are here to do the preseason pod for the 2023-2024 Auburn basketball team. It's very exciting. We got all 4 hosts on: Matt Donaldson, Ryan Norman, and Ben Young. We're very excited to start talking b-ball again. I know there's another sport going on that people don't want to talk about anymore, so that'll be the last time you hear it on here. We got a little schedule or breakdown here. We're going to talk about some news from the offseason. Matt's going to cover that, and then Ryan's going to talk about the new players, and Ben's going to talk about a little out of conference schedule, which is fantastic this year. So I hope we have a lot of people for that. At the top of the pod, we don't usually care too much or whatever, but get the word out there to your friends before the season starts. For us, this has been a great combo or a great situation where we all get to talk and reminisce and talk about the games or whatever. Hopefully it feels the same way for people listening, kind of get every game summary situation. If you don't have friends to talk about it with, you have us to talk about it with. So tell your friends, go in and rate us and review us and all that on the podcast app. Another big thing, we are going live on YouTube every game this season. Hopefully, it's just a hobby for us. It's just fun for us. So the plan is to go live after every game. We already record after every game. Why not go live with you guys? Throw your questions in there. Tell us your comments. Have kind of a cathartic. When we lose, we can all get together and grieve. And when we win, we can all get together and celebrate. So guys, welcome back to the season, guys.
It was a long off season, but we made it. We're pumped. And
can I get a War Eagle? Can I get a War Eagle from everybody?
War Eagle.
War damn Eagle.
I'm reserving my War Eagle because if anybody remembers our preseason podcast from last year, we whiffed pretty hard on some of those predictions, boys.
Can't wait to do it again tonight.
We're going to start off strong. I got my own personal rum this year, guys. I drink the Gosling's rum, and this has Gosling's rum in it, but I'm starting off with a little rum, and we're going to get Matt to tell us what has happened since the season ended. Oh, and before that too, Ben, Ryan, he's going to list off all these things that happened in the offseason. At the end, each of us is going to pick the thing that sticks out to us the most, the thing we most want to talk about. So Matt, hit us.
Yeah, pick a couple of things you guys want to react to. We figured it might be a little too much with 4 of us. So it's been a long off season, right? So much has changed in this new era of college basketball. Here's the players that are no longer on the team in case you weren't watching. Wendell Green Jr. is gone. Alan Flanagan is at Ole Miss. Johan is at UC Santa Barbara. Chance Westry's at Syracuse. Stretch went to George Washington. And Zep Jasper finally ran out of eligibility. So all those guys are gone. And how is Bruce Pearl going to retool this lineup? And also, Wes Flanagan, right? Wes Flanagan and the Bruce Pearl stuff that went down. We'll probably get into that a little more here in a minute, but he goes to Ole Miss with Allen, and then Auburn hires Corey Williams from Texas Tech as the new coach brought in. Steven was promoted, so we've gotten to talk to a lot of these guys on the pod, so we feel a little more like I feel at least a little more happy for these guys. Chad Pruitt became a full-time assistant coach. Mike Burgermaster became a full-time assistant coach. Ian Borders got a promotion. Maddox Jeffries got a promotion. So Bruce kind of doubled down on his staff. Corey Williams was an addition, but everybody else kind of he doubled down on his guys, basically, that we've had for quite a long time. So that's the coaching moves. Jalen Williams and Janai Broome tested the NBA and scared us a little bit, especially Janai Broome, because he performed really well. He earned a combine invite. If you paid attention to the draft, big guys didn't get drafted very well. Some dominant big men in college basketball just didn't. The NBA is just not looking for those back to the basket players. Broome increased his stock and comes back. So those two guys really were a big boost in the offseason to bring them in. I think the interesting thing, we'll talk more about new players specifically, but the big storyline that I remember from the offseason was this search for a wing player, right? When Allen Flanagan left, who are we going to get? We missed on a couple guys. A couple guys stayed at their respective schools. A couple guys chose different places. We ended up with some interesting pieces that we'll talk about. So that was a big piece. Bruce has continued to focus on NIL, perhaps even more than a basketball-only facility at this time, which I think is an interesting subplot to all this as we're trying to adjust to life in this new era. We've continued to see Bruce, and we've had some very lively debates in our group chat about recruiting strategy. And Bruce has just kind of planted his flag that he seems to want one or two elite guys in each class, and he's going to go transfer portal hard. And when you look at the track record, so far Auburn's coaches have killed it in the portal with hitting on more than they've missed. So that'll be a big storyline, I think, as we get into this team. How did Auburn do, and what is that going to look like for this season? I thought it was noteworthy. Bruce is 14 wins away from being the second winningest coach in Auburn history and only 40 away from the top spot. So potentially, like next year, Bruce Pearl could be the winningest coach in Auburn basketball history. Continues to make history like he always wants from his teams. Jalen Williams will become the winningest player in Auburn basketball history with Auburn's next win, partially due to COVID. But again, some experience there that I find valuable. Walker Kessler and Jabari Smith, season one of the pod, our favorites, all NBA rookies last year, which was great. They're off to a great start in their career, especially Walker. What he did in the NBA was a lot of fun to watch in the offseason. When Jackson and I started this podcast, we talked about the list of teams that have made 4 straight NCAA tournaments. It is way smaller than you think. It is really hard to do. We missed we had 2 or 3 in a row at one point, missed out the Sharif year. Now we've got 2. Can we make it 3 in a row this year? I think that's a storyline. And then preseason polls, just real quick. Those came out recently. Auburn was picked 6th by the media. And that order was Tennessee, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Kentucky, Alabama, then Auburn. So all the people we hate right above us. And we'll talk about that a little more. I've seen Auburn picked from 4th to 9th. There's a lot of variety on how people think about this team. And then lastly, we're less than 2 weeks away from starting against Baylor. First regular season game against Baylor. So a lot has happened. There's more than that, but just kind of a brief overview. We did not do as much off-season content as we probably did the previous summer. So that is a quick summary of everything that's happened. So maybe Jackson, you want to, any 1 or 2 things that jump out from that list that you found noteworthy this offseason?
Yeah, you said it before we started the recording, but just like I was trying to keep an open mind as you read through that list of what really impacted me and what do I think is gonna, I was saying what sticks out to me, and I have to be the visceral sticking out, and that's the Flanagans heading out. It hurts me personally. You guys know I've been a Flanagan stan on the podcast, and the big part is that it's not that Flanagan left. We kind of there was kind of a weird personality stuff there. I don't want to say toxic necessarily, but it seemed like the relationship was not great by the end. You were talking about Jalen there for a second, about how Jalen's going to be the winningest player. Jalen is what me and Matt, when we first signed Flanagan, he played well his freshman year. Jalen is what I thought Flanagan would be. this solid guy that's probably not an NBA guy, but man, we know as a team he's solid. We know he's got special moments in him. And by the end of the time at Auburn, he would be a guy that people on other teams look at and go, man, how long has this guy been there for? He's pretty good. He's not great, but he's annoying. We don't want to have to play him. But it didn't really work out that way with Flanigan. They both left for Ole Miss. Both his dad as coach Flanigan, which we've interviewed on here. Go check that out too. And the son, Allen. But what really hurts is not that he left necessarily, is that we did not fill that position with someone necessarily better. I got flamed a little bit, I think, by one of the Flanigan's uncles, maybe, by tweeting that I was looking forward to having, it was an opportunity to recruit with a guy that could finish at the basket and hit a three. Not that Flanigan couldn't necessarily do that. It's just, if we're going to get a guy at three, that's what we need them to do. And we there was a guy at Tennessee, Julian Phillips, we were looking at. That didn't really work out. I think he ended up going to the NBA, or at least trying to go to the NBA. We looked around, we just did not get that three position guy. And it is a position that I think we're going to look at through this whole season. We didn't have a great three position guy when Flanigan was hurt during the Jabari Walker Kessler run. And it hurt. There was a black hole over there. Cambridge was trying his best. Leor was trying his best. It just not really working out. Last year was not great either. Flanigan just did not play quite as well as I was hoping it was. I think this year will be another one where we kind of look around and we don't have that great player in Jabari and that great player in Walker to make up for the black hole at the three position. I know I've already gotten arguments online about it, but I think that's what we're going to be talking about. And I think if I have to predict Flanigan against Ole Miss, I hope we don't boo, but what I think is going to happen is I think we go to Ole Miss first. I think he's going to have a great game, some sort of in his head revenge game or something. And then by the time he comes back to Auburn, we're not going to want him to do well. And there's going to be some toxicity there that probably shouldn't be, just because I think in his head, it'll be a bit of revenge.
I'm speaking to myself here. We're going to hold the debates, because there was a lot that Jackson just said that I think we would all have opinions on. But for now, let's let Jackson have his topics there, and Brian's probably going to follow up on some of that.
I was ready.
I was assuming that was a shot at me, but yeah, go for it.
Keep it in your mind. We'll come back and have some open forum. Ryan, you have anything else mentioned in the offseason that caught your eye?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the nature of college basketball now is just so, I mean, it's free agency in the offseason. I mean, it's completely different. I think we finally saw that, and it's hard for people to grasp the nature of what the transfer portal is now and what high school recruiting is now. And we'll talk about that later as well. But I think that is starting to become more of a reality than it was maybe oh, that was just a 1-year thing. No, I think this is here to stay. And this year was one of the biggest indicators of that. I also find it fascinating, the players who went to try out for the NBA or for the combine, especially Janai, and him getting all that publicity. I think we finally have a guy that Janai was our guy last year, right? I mean, towards the end of the year, he was probably the most recognizable player from an Auburn fan perspective. And to have him coming back, and to have some of those guys coming back, like a Jalen, like a Chris Moore, just people who have been here for years. I think it's exciting that we have a player who we know is hopefully going to deliver, and hopefully going to deliver in big moments and in clutch moments. And we saw how much he improved towards the end of last year. So what is that going to be this year? Is he going to shoot more threes? Is he going to be more of a stretch five? All that stuff is very exciting to kind of see. And, I think it's a big headline going into this year.
Cool. Ben?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to echo a lot of what Jackson and Ryan have said so far, and what you kind of led off with just in terms of the overall storyline. I think this offseason was huge in terms of program building. We lost a big assistant, but he was picked up by a guy who's trying to rebuild the Ole Miss program. So we're having our assistants poached by top tier guys. I mean, Chris Beard's say what you want about him as a person. He knows his X's and O's, and he's going to build a competitive program there at Ole Miss. So we have those type of coaches that are poaching our guys. It wasn't a storybook offseason, but we were in the mix for a lot of top transfers. We were still in the mix for a lot of top recruits. And that's where you want to be as a program. You're not going to get every guy you want, either out of high school or out of the transfer portal. Not even, your Dukes and your Kansases can do that. But being in that mix and having the national media constantly saying your name up there with the other blue bloods besides Auburn, is really big for the program. And of course, here we are again talking about, can we make it a 3-year in a row streak of being in the NCAA tournament back to back to back, when we all grew up with, can we just get there? So I don't want that to be lost on anybody. I think we were all pretty realistic about what our expectations for the team were last year. And based on everything that I saw, even though it wasn't everything that I wanted, I think my expectations are higher for this year's team.
Well, we'll talk more about that for sure. I think we'll have some lively debate.
Matt, do you have one that sticks out to you the most?
Well, I was just going to say, we've talked a lot on this podcast about, Bruce has been very public. Like, if we can just be consistently in the top half of the SEC, that puts us probably as a top 25 program in the country. And it kind of feels like, I hate to even say it, it makes me nervous, but it kind of feels like we've built that. Like, when you look around this, I'm lower on this Auburn team than a lot of people are. I still think we're close to being the top 25 team, even if you don't necessarily see, or you haven't seen some of the pieces prove themselves at this level. Part of that's the respect for the coaching staff. And last year, we could all agree, was kind of a bit of a lethargic year compared to what we've seen in some years prior. But we won the games we were supposed to win for the most part. It wasn't always pretty. And some years you grind it out and you get to the tournament and you get to the second round, and we're up on Houston, at halftime in the second round with a chance to go to the Sweet 16. So I think the team had some holes, but like Ben said, it's going to be really interesting to see how that transitions into this year. And I'm really excited to see, we're going to be tested early, and we're going to know a lot more about this team. And I think they're going to be a little more battle tested, hopefully come out of the end of that into SEC play maybe this year than we have been in the past. So
we're talking about coaches in there. Shout out to Burgo getting the promotion here, and shout out to how this at a conference came together too. That's, you're talking about that Baylor one started off. That's huge. I'm extremely most excited I've ever been. I think maybe since the Hawaii year that, the Bahamas year was fun too. I think this is probably the most exciting year. Ryan, you want to get going, or you guys want to keep talking about the top, or you want to get Ryan? You want to start off on the new players here?
Yeah, so let's kind of go over some. Obviously, we went over who left, but one of the key things and some of the names that are going to be really sticking out this year are the guys that we brought in through the transfer portal and one through recruiting. All going to be major parts of this team. I mean, I think some are going to be starters, some are going to be starters by middle of the year. Like, it's going to be interesting to see what the lineup is at a certain point. But biggest name, and the guy who I think was number one on our transfer list and who this staff wanted, was Denver Jones from FIU. I think one of the key parts about this acquisition, and why I feel like recruiting is kind of going the way it is at a guard position, is that Denver Jones has 2 years of eligibility. Bearing some major year that he's going to have, he's going to be back next year, which is something that I think people lose sight of in terms of that. But anyways, Denver Jones is a shooting guard that we have. He averaged over 20 points last year at FIU, was a scorer, is a flat out shooter. I think Bruce has talked about this a lot, but he can shoot. But one of the things that he's been most impressed with him is his ability to get to the basket. He didn't do a lot of that at FIU last year. He didn't have to. He just was a scorer. But, in SEC play and what we do now, the 2 guard and getting to the rim is massive. And I think you're going to see just him explode this year at the 2 positions. So Denver Jones is a shooting guard who we brought in, who has 2 years of eligibility left. Chaney Johnson, who is going to be a fascinating follow throughout the year, and fascinating because he came from Division II, from UAH up the road in Huntsville. Chaney is a 3-4, we think, maybe a starting 4. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. But he led the conference in scoring last year. He is the Gulf South Conference Player of the Year. He actually played against Auburn last year, had, I think, 15 or 16 points when he played against us in a game. But he is going to be someone who we're going to talk about here in a little bit, and is going to be a fascinating puzzle piece to the team this year. And then we also had Chad Baker-Mazzara, who is a transfer as well from JUCO, but he actually played at San Diego State, who obviously went to the national championship game last year and was a 6th man of the year in that conference that he played with in the Mountain West, before going over to JUCO. Some key stats with him. He is a lot is unknown about Chad Baker-Mazara, honestly. I think that's one of the biggest question marks of this year is how is he going to fit into this team? I think in the pro day, he was the leading scorer. He was the best shooter. He didn't miss a shot. And there was a lot of positivity coming from him from that pro day. He shot 48% from the field last year, 47% from the three, and to Ben's ears, 83% from the line. So he is, I think he's going to surprise a lot of people this year, but we'll have that conversation here in a minute. And then one of the biggest acquisitions and key, players that I think is going to be also another fascinating follow this year is 5-star point guard Aden Holloway, who was a McDonald's All-American, which, Auburn has had less than 5 of those in our history. And this is one of them, which is, something that I think we used to really like covet back in the day. Like that used to be being a McDonald's All-American was like this big kind of honor. And I think that's they're giving it away too much now. But anyways, this is could be a massive player, a key part of this team this year. I think what's also interesting about a lot of these players is that there's just a lot of unknown about them, right? Like we think we know what we're getting, but we really don't. Like Aden Holloway, he's a 5-star point guard, but there's only so much tape out there on him. Like I'm really excited to see these guys play. There's also one other player who came in that may be a part of the rotation is Aiden Scott. I don't really think we're going to see him much. I think he's a stretch. He's going to be sitting on the bench, but it's a really interesting mix because we have the guys who are coming back this year, and you didn't have to flip your entire roster to. Part of what I think is difficult about transfer portal for a lot of teams is that they're trying to flip their entire roster in a year. And that's just where you don't get that chemistry, that cohesiveness. We didn't really have to flip our whole roster. Like we brought back some very key pieces. So what can we bring to try to improve this team, try to make this team mesh a little better? And I think, so far just looking at it on paper and what the practices have shown, what the press conferences said, I think the staff has done a really good job so far of these 4 or 5 players that we brought in. But what sticks out to you all the most? What is kind of your most exciting thing about these guys who've come in and kind of filling in what had left and then what we're replacing with currently?
I want to go out on a limb here and say the most interesting thing to me about these newcomers is who we kept around. I thought it's huge that we kept Chris Moore. That just shows you once again that that's a guy who's probably going to see even less playing time than he did last year, mixed in with the injury, who's stuck around. He's a part of the program. He's going to be a good mentor. He understands body and positioning in a really important way. And we also kept KD Johnson. I would not have figured his ego would be able to take the amount of guard talent that we brought in. And even with the potential of someone like a Chaney playing maybe like a long 3, I think it speaks volumes about the character of guys that Bruce is bringing into the program when you can see what guys are willing to step back and take less minutes.
I think it's interesting the different narratives I've heard about these players, and it's so silly the limited amount of time we get to see these guys. Matt already said we're not watching or not doing a pod on the exhibition game because you freak out about every little thing when you don't know much about stuff. Chaney Johnson, the narrative is that he might actually beat Jalen as the starter. There's a chance there that he might play some 3. He's just playing so well. And the narrative when we first took him was, a D2 guy, kind of a shot in the dark a bit. Now he's been kind of the most like hyped up guy in the offseason from the new guys. Aiden, the point guard, he in the pro day, he didn't play very well. And people were like, oh no, that was our first look at him. And then I heard he played well later on. So in the practice the other day, same with Chad Baker-Mazara. His big thing, which you'll probably hear more and more about during the season, is how skinny he is. Apparently he's like a stick and people are worried he's going to get knocked around up there. But so it's great to hear that he hit a bunch of shots.
I kind of agree with both of you. I think the big uncertainty around this roster and the new guys is personally, I think people are undervaluing how much the ball was in the hands of Alan Flanagan and Wendell Green Jr. I think how that gets filled is really interesting to me, and how much do we trust the pieces to fill those roles? I think says a lot about how you feel about this team. If you think Aiden Holloway and Trey Donaldson are ready at point and that it's going to be an improvement, then you're probably feeling pretty good. If you have no questions and concerns about the three, you probably feel pretty good. If you're like me, and I honestly think 5 different players could play the three this year in that rotation of 2 guys, and I have no idea who it's going to be depending on how the coaching staff feels. So I think we did a good job. I agree with Jackson. I'm going to need to see it from some of these new guys with the jump in competition. Having said that, though, Janai Broom jumped from competition, had a terrific all SEC season last year. We've had success with other guys. Wendell Green Jr. was a small school guy. I know he was kind of controversial opinions about his play, in the last couple of years. So really curious to see how it plays out. And Bruce seems to really like this team. He likes the culture that they've come into, like Ben said, having these core guys to lead. And he said these newcomers are some of the hardest workers he's brought into the program. He seems to really like, and if you read between the lines, Bruce kind of was willing to stay pat with this roster earlier than a lot of fans wanted him to. Like, there were people that wanted him to go get another extra guy with the extra scholarship. There were people that questioned some of these takes on these new guys. And I think Bruce kind of likes the group. And typically when Bruce likes the group, there's some results there. I'm just going to need to see it from some of it.
To tell you a little bit where we were on the last offseason, to get your brain straight a little bit about getting expectations and hyped up for new players that might look good in practice or might have been good coming in. This time last year, we were going nuts for Chance Westry. We thought this guy was going to be the star of our team. He was going to play point guard. He was going to play 3. He was going to hit every shot. This Johan Traore guy from France, he was going to be dunking on people. He was going to be dunking on the Eiffel Tower. I made French content in Paris because I was so excited about French basketball jersey, for goodness sakes. I shouldn't have anything French in my house at all. He tricked me so bad. So just, wait till we see some stuff out there. Even the first couple games, that first game we watched Chance Westry, we thought he was the man. So it might take some time. And this year, my thought and hype on players, it's going to take at least 6 or 7 games before I start admitting anybody is as good or bad as we thought they were. And Matt's been doing that for years, but I'm going to hold on.
Let's take a moment and go back and talk about where these guys came from, though, because that's part of what's been so interesting to watch with Bruce's recruiting strategy. Guys that are coming fresh out of high school, it is a massive jump in competition. It's so difficult to go from a place where probably for half the season, you're going to be the biggest, most athletic guy on the court, and you're going to do whatever you want, to now suddenly you're going up against guys your own size and speed, and you're going to have to rely a lot more on technique. We got a really great chance last year to see just how much of a unicorn Jabari Smith Jr. was. The fact that he came in so ready and so dominant from the jump. And we knew that by the tournament in Atlantis. We saw what a special talent he was and how he could create his own shots. And that's something that, although Ryan says they've expanded the McDonald's All-American a little bit, that really is only something you see from those type of guys that have already played at that level of competition. But you look at guys like Walker Kessler that we bring in from somewhere else in the division. You look at guys that transfer in from other programs. They adapt much, much faster. And that seems to be the way that Bruce wants to go with his recruiting. He wants to go and find proven guys that can fit into his system and not have to worry about farming up so much talent from the high school level.
Ryan, you saw Aiden Holloway at practice, right? Are you worried at all about his low 3-point shooting release? Do you notice that at all?
No, I think what's been fascinating is, so he could score. The guy could step back. He can go off the pick and roll. I think you're going to see that pretty early and pretty often. Like, that's his game. I think what's been interesting is in some of the interviews that Bruce has had and through other things is that he has difficulty passing, like assisting or stuff like that, which, makes me think that he may not be a 1 in the end, like maybe, which is, next year why I feel like maybe he might get 2. That's obviously down the road. Like, we don't even know how he's going to play this year. But I think that his shooting style, I think it's going to be fine because he has quite a bit of range. There were a lot of logo 3s, which, Auburn fans love the logo 3 from Jared to Wendell. But, I think you're going to actually see that's not going to be as much of a problem. What I think is, I wanted to kind of step back and go back to what Matt said earlier about Chaney and Jalen and like how they're kind of going a little bit at the starting job. Jalen, I love Jalen as a player. I think he's great. I think we all know our frustrations with Jalen in that Jalen plays to his matchup a lot, right? Like there are some games where you're like, has Jalen scored? There's others where he has the first 15 points of the game because they keep feeding him. He knows his matchup. So it's fascinating to me that Chaney has come in. He's worked his tail off. He's gained 15 pounds. He's what some players call the most athletic guy they've ever seen. It makes me wonder that are they going to start Chaney because maybe they don't feel comfortable enough starting Jalen in some of these games because of the matchup. You know, it's like we know that Chaney's going to go out there. He's going to get boards. He's going to work hard, and then we'll bring Jalen off the bench in that first sub. That's something I'm going to be keeping my eye on because you just kind of felt that a little bit last year in some of these games. It's like Jalen's our guy this game. We're going to feed him, and you know when he's going to go off that game by like the first few possessions. Others, you could tell when it's like he's not in this, and it kind of started the game off in a weird kind of way. That's just kind of what I noticed and my thoughts on it. So I find it interesting, something to kind of watch as the year goes on, because in the past, Bruce has always loved to keep the same starting five. Last year, we didn't really see that as much. I think due to some players being hurt or whatever. So this year he has legitimately, I think this might be the first time where I don't really know who our starting five is going to be.
I love to plug every time I get a chance that when we interviewed Bruce Pearl, his different answers to our questions, and when we brought up that he doesn't like to change his starting lineup ever, pretty much, he denied that. He said that, no, I didn't know what we were talking about. He's fine with changing a starting lineup. So maybe for the first time this year, from our eyes, he'll be changing it up between the matchups, like you're saying with Jalen. But if I could bet my life savings on that, I would.
So here's the other thing that I think is interesting in that regard is, despite what Bruce may have told us on the pod, I think we're right that he believes in his guys and he likes his systems, and he likes being able to put out the same starting five every game, because then you get to watch, well, what's the other team doing to stop our offense? And I think the issue for me midway through last year, when we had some injuries and Alan Flanagan was forced into the starting lineup, when we went to our bench players, we didn't have a guy as part of that second unit. And I would be very interested to see Aiden Holloway as the point guard coming off the bench, much like Wendell Green did in his first year, because now you've got somebody who can be a scorer and who can be a little bit of a facilitator. But if he's coming off the bench at the same time as Denver Jones is coming to the bench at the 2, now you're putting him out there with KD Johnson, who, for all of his flaws, has excellent vision down low of getting the ball to our big men. So you're talking about a potential bench group of Aiden Holloway, KD Johnson, and Jalen Williams. And that to me seems like a really great offensive recipe. You have a whole bunch of complementary skill sets that are there that can work the offense in a good way with your second unit.
Ben, is this the most exciting out of conference schedule we've had in Bruce Pearl's era?
It's got to be close. It's giving us probably our best chance at some quality losses. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Once you get into conference play, you don't want to take a loss. Every loss is a bad loss, no matter how well things are going or whatever you want to say about it. There's no such thing as a good loss in conference. You want to win as many of those games as you can. And more often than not, as a team, you're not trying to learn anything at that point. You're trying to make your strengths work. You're trying to cover up as many of your weaknesses as you can. And if you go on the road and lose by 2 at Vanderbilt on a buzzer beater, you're going to chalk that up to, college basketball can be chaos sometimes. But we're playing some really good teams this year. We have 2 ranked teams in the preseason top 25 that are on our schedule. We're playing 4 tournament teams out of conference, and we're going to be playing in a variety of locations, which is great for recruiting.
Who we starting with? What are they ranked? Run us through the schedule here.
Baylor, number 20. Last year, they finished 4th in the Big 12. They finished with a 23-11 record, 11-7 in conference, kind of similar to where we finished. The interesting thing for them is they have lost their top 3 scorers. Keontae George, I believe, has gone to the NBA. LJ Cryer transferred to Houston, and Jalen Bridges is also gone. And those 3 guys combined for 41 points a game last year for them. So you're talking about a Baylor team that's basically got to completely retool its entire offense and replace a ton of production. Baylor also was bounced in the second round. However, unlike us, they came in as a 3 seed and they were bounced by Creighton. We've also got a few cupcakes.
I'm seeing Baylor's higher than 20, right? I was pulling it up, but I thought they were a top 10 team, right? in the
I
AP
don't.
poll.
That was what I last saw, but I may be wrong on that. I'm going to pull
Maybe
that
I'm
up
the wrong one.
while we're looking here. But
Maybe
we've also got
CBS. I think CBS had them as a top 10 team, but CBS's poll was wild.
Yeah, they are a little bit crazy. We've also got our rematch with the University of Southern California. This time they're coming to Neville Arena. And in a lot of ways, I feel like the USC game was a huge benchmark for us. We learned a lot. We were forced to play without Wendell Green Jr. for the first time ever. Janai Broome came out and really established himself, especially in the second half of that game when we had to make a run. And we saw the emergence of Trey Donaldson as a true starting point guard. I think if you want to look back to some of his best plays, they were in the Houston game and then in this USC game where he was our second leading scorer. ESPN has Baylor ranked 20th.
Oh,
I don't know if that's official AP or if that's what ESPN thinks. I don't know. Matt's scrolling through our schedule here for us. You can take a look. But we've got some other marquee names on there.
I mean, we
start off recognize.
We start off strong there, right? We got
Baylor
let's not get crazy.
Off,
then you skip one and then you go straight into Notre Dame.
So Notre Dame is another team that's in a massive rebuild. Their top scorer last year only averaged about 14 points a game, Nate Laszewski, and he has gone to the NBA. Carmack Ryan, their second leading scorer, averaged just over 12 points a game. He transferred to North Carolina. And Dane Goodwin, their third leading scorer, is also, I believe, an unrestricted free agent. I'm not sure if he's signed or not, but he averaged a little over 11 points a game. So again, we have another team that's got to replace all of their top scorers and find a new identity. That's not to say that Notre Dame can't be good this year, but last year they weren't particularly impressive. They finished at 11-21. But more importantly, for my mind, they were 14th in the ACC. They had a 3-17 record in conference, which means at no point last season did they put it together. And I think that's part of why you see one of their top guys who didn't go to the league transfer programs. He's looking to try to get somewhere to get some wins and get to the dances last year.
I guarantee no other podcast is breaking down Notre Dame as thoroughly as our podcast is tonight.
I certainly hope so.
And the biggest note about that game, in my opinion, my humble opinion, is that is in New York City, baby, where me and Ben live. We love it up here. We're very excited that our guys are coming up again. They came up a couple years ago and had a tournament they won, which was really fun. I think in that 2019-20 year that was sadly cut short. And me and Ben will be there along with a lot of other people at the New York City Auburn Club. We're hoping to do something live around it. Me and Matt did a live podcast with Burgermaster and Coach Pruitt in Brooklyn for the draft a while back. I don't know if we'll do post game or what we'll do, but we'll do something around it. Even if it's just me and Ben sitting out in the street doing it live, we'll do something. So let us know if you're coming in town. Buy your tickets now through the New York City Auburn Club. So you're sitting in the same section with us. It also goes towards our scholarship fund. So that's all very exciting, way better than sitting in whatever random section. So come up and say hey to us. Me and Ben, grab a drink with us, whatever. It's going to be a ton of fun.
And you get two games in 2 days.
That's right.
In 2 days in Brooklyn.
And if you're a Thanksgiving person, it's right before Thanksgiving week. So if you're coming up from Auburn or whatever, if you're debating about it, take those 2 days off a little early, fly up here, do Thanksgiving, week where you're probably off work anyways. The kids are probably off school. Come enjoy some New York City stuff. New York City in the fall is amazing. Perfect time to come.
Yeah, the other two teams on the other side of the Empire Classic are Oklahoma State and St. Bonaventure. We don't know which of those teams we will be playing, unfortunately. That's going to depend on which of them wins that game. And then the tournament is kind of like another Cancun mini tournament. It's just you win 2 games and you're crowned the winner. There's not a loser's bracket or anything like that. Last year, Oklahoma State finished 20-16 overall. They were 8-10 in the conference. I tend to look at your conference record as an indication of just how good you were overall as a team. Just because by the time you get into conference play, you really should have figured out your identity and be where you're going to be for the rest of the year. I think they might have taken an NIT invitation, but let me take a look here.
The Bonnies, baby.
Yeah, National Invitational Tournament after they got bounced by Texas from the Big 12 Championship. They beat Youngstown State, they beat Eastern Washington, and they lost to North Texas in the 3rd round of the National Invitational Tournament. So Oklahoma State, they won some games last year. They had a decent year, but this is a tournament that Auburn should win.
I'm pretty sure they got boomed by the NCAA, right? They're the team, like they're the Missouri of basketball, where they got boomed for no reason. So just like us, honestly, we got the worst punishment in this entire. I don't know if you guys remember this, but I'll rant all day long about this. The FBI investigations and all that from several years ago, just fine, like 10 years ago. Holy crap. I mean, Bruce has been here for 10 years now. These FBI investigations and bribery scandal have the world of college sports has moved on so far. And Kansas had Adidas basketball reps giving their players hundreds of thousands of dollars to come to their school. They got nothing at all. Never cooperate with NCAA. We cooperate, lost in all season. There's no guarantee we would have made the tournament that year, but I think with the motivation, we would have made it. We lost Purefoy for a year and a half. Never seen a player get a year and a half. I've never seen a player get more than a year unless they were cheating on PEDs. Austin Wiley for a year. Oh my goodness. Don't get me started. Oklahoma State was the only other team that really got the way we did. And Kansas got nothing because the Blue Bloods never get anything.
This is the best. This is why you listen to this podcast, people. Like that rant, Jackson has done that rant to me on the phone so many times. It's hilarious. And it's so true, though. It's so true. It's terrible.
Well, and so we'll play maybe we'll make a big stink of it when we're in town, the screw the NCAA game, Auburn versus Oklahoma State. But keep going down the schedule. I just love, even though I knew the schedule, I'm getting surprised by how many teams we're getting to play this year, man. How many is this? 5 major teams from major conferences on the schedule? That's like amazing compared to a lot of conferences we used to have. It's so cool.
Yeah, the unfortunate side of that is a lot of them are not quite on the up and up. Virginia Tech is our next big non-conference matchup. I'm not going to count Alabama A&M or Southeastern Louisiana. Those are games that we should both win just purely based on talent. Virginia Tech finished 10th in the ACC last year, 19-15 overall, but they went 8-12 in the conference. Their top scorer, Grant Basel, was 16 and a half points a game. He's now playing in the Euro Leagues. Decided he'd rather do that than take the NIL money. So once again, you see just how important it is to have a strong NIL to keep these players around your program that you need. They do, however, return one of their top guards, Sean Padula. He's going to be back. He scored around 15 points a game. But the exciting thing for me this year is I feel like we finally have size at guard. So I'm less worried about these score first guards just being able to blow by our starting guys. We're going to have a Bulldog at point and Trey. We're going to have Denver Jones is 6'4", right? Or did I make that up? Ryan, you want to chime in? How tall is Denver Jones?
There, I guess.
Yeah, he's around there. So we've got a little bit of imposing size at guard now, which is nice. And let's see here. What else do we have about Virginia Tech? Yeah, and then their third leading scorer is the only other person who is in double digits, Justin Mutt, 10 points a game. He is currently an unrestricted free agent. Let's see here. App State finished 16-16 with a 9-9 conference overall record for you number weirdos like me that enjoy that. They were 9th in the Sun Belt, so not a particularly impressive team. I don't expect them to surprise us. Then we have a really fantastic marquee matchup with last year's runner-up in the Big Ten, Indiana.
That's fantastic. I just think that's so cool to play them. It's just another one of those, like, we know we're in the golden years with Bruce Pearl, and now we get to play Indiana, which would never sniffed at us in years past to play us out of guards. Now it's in Atlanta, fine, but that's a home game for us anyways. I'd love to see them in Auburn. But man, we are starting to get some major teams like Virginia Tech and coming up in a bit, USC, and we're getting teams like Indiana to come to our version of a neutral site game, which is just, that would have never happened 5 or 10 years ago. And every year it gets better.
Hotbed for us.
It's going to be a great environment because Indiana fans are like Kentucky fans. They'll travel. I mean, I hope it will be a mostly Auburn crowd, but there's going to be a lot of red there. And
there's every real possibility that we could only have one loss going into that game.
I know, Matt, I think you've been to a couple of these in Atlanta, maybe Ryan too. We've played, who did we play recently? Coach Flanagan coached at the last one, right? Was that Louisville or who was that?
Nebraska. And then we lost to Memphis last year.
Oh, brutal.
Oh, that one was brutal.
So these Atlanta, we've been having these Atlanta matchups about once a year. Oh man, I'm seeing it now. I was just about to say something Bruce likes to do is to play in Atlanta once a year. Great recruiting. Hopefully we can get a major team like Indiana to come in. The other thing that's so weird, it hurts every time. But honestly, we've had some good games out of it. We're going to Huntsville to play UNC Asheville. It's so odd. At least it's not at UNC Asheville. At least it's like a neutral to like
Well-
I'm sure the Huntsville people love it. I'm sure they're going to go nuts for it. Unique things. Honestly, what the big thing for me is not actually, I'm cool with this now because the more I think about it, because what it was that I didn't like was going down to South Alabama and playing in their arena. It's just a recipe for an upset that hurts us later on. Playing amongst our Huntsville fans against UCF, that's kind of fun. I kind of like that.
This will be a home game. So Auburn played St. Louis and Birmingham a couple years ago. I don't know if y'all remember. I think it was 3 years ago. But Alabama goes to Huntsville to play every year. They go to Birmingham to play every year. I think Bruce is like, hey, we have a hotbed of fans up in Huntsville. Let's go up there, and UNC Asheville, okay opponent, but that's a great opportunity.
Whoa. Hang on, because we're jumping ahead. But let me finish about Indiana really quick before we get to UNC Asheville. Indiana lost its 2 top scorers to the NBA, and they didn't just lose a top scorer. They lost one of those few guys that averaged over 20 points a game. Trace Jackson Davis is now, I believe, with the Warriors, averaged almost 21 points a game for Indiana last year. They also lost one of their guards, Jalen Hood Schifino. He averaged 13 and a half a game for them. So you're talking about a team that once again has to replace a huge chunk of their scoring potential by the time they get here. But Indiana knows our pain. They went out in the second round to Miami last year in last year's tournament. So Indiana is one of those 4 tournament teams in our non-conference. The next one is UNC Asheville. UNC Asheville won the Big South last year. They finished 27-8 with a 16-2 record in conference. So obviously they're one of those teams that tends to squash their own conference, but they also don't play a lot of these marquee out of conference matchups, in part because they want to pad that resume in terms of how they're going to get into the NCAA tournament. Now they're usually, in the 13 to 16 seed range because are they in the Big South or are they in the Gulf Coast? Which one are they in?
UNC Asheville?
Yeah. I have listed Big South, but that seems wrong to me.
All I know about UNC Asheville is they had a player on their team about 10 years ago named Kenneth George Jr., 7'7". And I watched them play North Carolina, and Tyler Hansbrough dunked on them. It was one of those great moments. I don't know if people watch college basketball, or at least I don't watch it the same way as I used to back in the cable days. And you'd get home from school and he would just kind of throw on whatever game was on that night or whatever. I remember that happening. And that's like my one note on UNC Asheville.
But UNC Asheville's played a lot of those games, and they're usually one of those teams that sneaks in the back door of the conference as a low seed. I don't know if they've had one of their marquee upsets yet. Last year they went out in the first round to UCLA, who was, I believe, a 2 seed, winning the Pac-12. So they don't tend to have a great showing in the tournament, but they are sort of a national brand. So this is actually a really sneaky good matchup for us because you might be able to steal some guys that would think, oh, let me go play at UNC Asheville. But if they can get on Auburn's radar, why would you not want to go to a team like Auburn over a team like UNC Asheville? That's just my opinion.
That completes a rotation of playing in Mobile, Huntsville, Birmingham, and even if I like to count, and we play Atlanta every year. My first year, I believe, me and Ryan went together to Bridgestone Arena to watch him play MTSU. Bruce's marketing ability and thinking big picture on this stuff is just amazing. And you don't see it in every other sport, and you don't see it at Auburn a lot, honestly. Like Bruce Pearl is a talent to come in and think to himself, it would be good to establish a brand and get these people involved. So many other coaches are so locked in on their little pieces of their home. They don't want to go do something weird. They get really nerdy about their stuff. Bruce wants that big picture and go around the state and kind of solidify this branding in the state. I love it.
So our next big out of conference matchup, we're finally back at that USC game. We could have, maybe should have, I might argue, have won that game last year in Los Angeles. It was still exciting for us to get out there and play on the West Coast. Bad news for us. Boogie Ellis is back. He was their leading scorer last year, averaging almost 18 a game, but he scored 28 against us in an instance where, once again, we were without Wendell Green Jr. as a starter. They lost Drew Peterson, who was one of their big small forwards. I believe he's still kind of playing that as an unrestricted free agent in the NBA. He averaged almost 14 a game, so they've got to replace some size, which is helpful for us, but they're also returning guard Reese Dixon Waters, who averaged about 10 points a game, which is exactly what he had against us for them last year. However, this year, they got to come to Neville. So it's going to be a very interesting matchup. USC finished 22-11 overall, 14-6 in conference in a pretty good Pac-12 conference out west, to be tied for second with Arizona, who was projected to win the league. So USC was a tricky team to figure out last year. They had times where they were hot, times they were not so much, and they went out in the first round to Michigan State.
Ben, don't tell me you're going to skip the reason everybody's got this game circled, right? LeBron James's son, Bronny Jr., is at USC. And honestly, I was super excited. He was going to get the ESPN treatment, I believe. The Zion Williams, whatever. Like, he's not that good. He's fine. He's a 4-star, but he's going to get that ESPN treatment, and all his games are going to be on prime time, and everybody's going to be watching. Very sadly, had a cardiac arrest in practice about a month or two ago, and people were acting like maybe that he would not see the basketball court ever again, that he made it. Like, everybody was talking about for years. One day, Bronny Jr. and LeBron, his dad, might play in the NBA together. And that'll be when LeBron retires, the day that he can play with his son in the NBA, only for his son to end up having a cardiac arrest on the court like a month or two ago. But I'm seeing now that he plans on playing this year still. I don't know all the details, but hopefully by then, this will be another, like, just going up and down the schedule, how many fun games we have in the Attic Conference. If Bronny Jr. is playing and doing pretty well, that game is going to be circled by ESPN as a game to be in Neville Arena on a Sunday.
It'll be interesting to see just how much of him we see this season. If he decides to actually come back and try and play. I think if he wants to jump to the league next year, he needs to play this year. I don't think people saw enough from his high school tape to take a chance on him without seeing him against slightly elevated competition this year. But that really is the last marquee matchup in terms of out of state or out of conference play, rather. We're going to play the University of Pennsylvania, Donald Trump's alma mater, who finished third in the Ivy League last year.
What a fact.
Look, I had to drop something in there. Pennsylvania had a pretty unremarkable year last year for the Ivy League. 17-13 overall, pretty mid, and went 9-5 in conference to finish third in the Ivy League. Ivy League is another one of those leagues. They will send their champion to the NCAA tournament, and that's usually about it. There aren't really any huge matchup issues that I can foresee in or out of conference aside from Boogie Ellis, and without really understanding what our starting guard positions are going to look like, I don't know how well we defend him, because I don't think we needed to contain him last year to win that game. I think the problem was we let USC play from ahead before we figured out our identity to go into Janai, just because of where we're at early in the season. And so I think that's probably what excites me most about our non-conference schedule overall, is we have the opportunity to take some losses that won't hurt us overall with some marquee matchups from Division I schools from power conferences. And then sprinkled throughout that, we have some of those smaller teams where you're really going to have a chance to establish your identity and figure out who you are. So I expect us to go into conference play with 1 or 2 losses. I think anything above 3 losses, we start to worry about the overall efficacy of this team in conference, because we're not going up against a ton of proven talent. Baylor's recruited remarkably well over the years, but they're as unproven as some of our transfer guys are. Virginia Tech and Notre Dame haven't particularly reloaded, and neither is Indiana, to my understanding, with proven guys.
I think an interesting note in there is after that USC game, I didn't realize this, but like a week later, a couple of days, whatever, we play Alabama State in Auburn Arena. There's a couple like this at a conference. I mean, these real clunkers, these real further down teams that we should just wallop. We used to have every year a couple of those in a row. And man, it's like covering it in the podcast or just watching people, like was always this week or two in that conference that you can close your eyes. It didn't matter, and it kind of hurt the momentum of like what was going on, because we would just run through, and all it was risk. If we just had a really bad night to lose to one of these accidentally, an embarrassing one that everybody posts about the next day. This year, you have 1 or 2 of those, Alabama State, South Louisiana, but they are always in between 2 really fun games to watch. So it's going to be a great momentum situation.
Well, and so, I think it's interesting because I look at the USC game, Alabama State, Chattanooga scares me just a tiny bit, because they went to the NCAA tournament, only lost by 1 to Illinois a few years ago, 2 years ago, actually. They're a team that could we'll see when that time comes. They could be bad this year, who knows? But they are a team in that conference with, like the likes of Mercer and Furman and Sanford. Like they could pose a little problem.
The advantage, in my opinion, is that we do have the Alabama State tune-up. If there's any sort of hangover, we could wind up in a situation where we take 3 losses in a row with UNC Asheville, USC, and Indiana all back-to-back. that could be
That'd
a
be bad.
potential where the wheels start to fall off a little bit. You have an Alabama State tune-up game, and then Chattanooga. I don't think they've added anyone this year that makes them scary in terms of. I don't think they're going to have an answer for Janai. I just don't. And we saw last year teams that didn't have an answer for Janai. We were even when we were at our worst, we were still able to build a comfortable enough lead. Chattanooga finished 18-17 last year, but again, they were 7-11 in their conference, which means that the roster they had never really put it together. And I don't think they added anyone that's going to bring them into a Southern Conference championship team this year.
Here's the big picture thing, I think, for everybody to remember. This staff has done an incredible job compared to where we've done historically. Not necessarily like the name brand talent and the names of the universities is great, and we're excited about this schedule. But last year, even with a schedule that Jackson probably would have said on this podcast, is like, whatever. You know what? That we are so good at playing the quadrants game and the numbers game of the tournament, and Mike Burgermaster has been a big part of that.
Massive.
That's what stabilized us last year, guys. Like, we were not playing good basketball, but when you put forth the right teams, and somebody hit on it earlier, where losses are okay. Like, this is not other sports where it can eliminate you and cause a lot of pain. It's okay. I think we're going to lose more than one or two, and I think it'll be good for us. I think we're going to learn a lot more about who we are and where we're at. And I just think it lays out really nicely. Ben, you actually helped me think about some of those players. And you're right. Sometimes the name and the metrics are going to say this team is probably maybe a little better than they are, which is kind of what you want when you're looking at your numbers at the end of the year.
I love the schedule because it is a step up. Like you were talking about the last year, I was complaining about the schedule a bit. Not actually complaining, I've always admitted that they do a really good job of playing the NCAA tournament game, getting these little scrappy teams that make the tournament every year. And we look up at the end of the year and we go, wow, we played a lot of teams that made it this year. Further down in talent, win their smaller conferences. That's what we had to do at Auburn. People with the big names wouldn't play us. So we had to play smart and play these teams that were going to win their conferences. We're taking that next step, it feels like, with this schedule. We still got a couple of those guys on the schedule, like you were talking about, little dangerous small conference teams that might make these to a tournament, make us look good. But now we're getting those exciting games where we can take a shot. One of those games like Baylor, where if we lose against Baylor, it's not that big of a deal. But if we win, it's a lot of fun. And that's where I want to be in that conference. I want to be playing teams that if we win, it's fun. And if we lose, it doesn't hurt us that bad. And that seems to be what we're getting to.
Ben did a great job. Ben did a great job breaking down the opponents. You missed one thing, Ben. You missed the fact that USC is coming to Auburn. They're playing at Neville Arena.
And then the Acadome.
They're going to the Acadome, baby, and they're playing ASU.
I was going to bring that up, and he beat me.
Wait, hang on. I'm sorry. You're right. I completely missed that. No, you want to talk about, like, again, that's the genius of Bruce, right? Because why play that game in Auburn? What do you gain from playing that game in Auburn? Nothing. But now you're bringing in a whole potential for new people to watch the team that might never get to come and see them. You're in a pretty decent hotbed of recruiting in South Alabama down there. That's a great idea.
They're playing Neville, aren't they?
No, well, so ASU's playing in Neville, but USC, after playing us in Auburn, they just announced it a week or two ago that USC is going to play in the Acadome to support the HBCUs. I think that's so interesting. And like I was talking about the Bronny Jr. angle, like I think that's not being underlined. ESPN has been hyping Bronny for years now. He's going to come in, like, this is going to get ESPN treatment. Them going is like going to get some marketing too. I just think that's so interesting that we play ASU after that. So ASU is going to play Auburn and USC back to back. They'll probably never had something like that before.
In the Acadome, man, it's crazy. Like Auburn would never
go watch the Acadome brawls. We love. There was a Montgomery brawl recently, and I love so many Montgomery brawls. You could just type in, like, the only bad part of Montgomery brawl is that you can't find all the other brawls there used to be. I'm from Montgomery, everyone, just in case you don't know. The Acadome brawl is interesting.
Well, it's awesome. Like we were talking earlier about the UNC Asheville game at Huntsville. I think it's, when you look at college basketball teams that have a regional fan base, right, and a state fan base, like you look at North Carolina, like they'll randomly go play in a Raleigh, or they'll randomly go play in a Greensboro or somewhere like there, where like the fans who don't have the opportunity to see them on a day-to-day basis will go and flock to the arena to see them. I think going to Huntsville, Alabama's done this every year for 10 years now. So the fact that Bruce recognizes that and recognizes how big the Auburn fan base is in the Huntsville, Madison area, it's already sold out. Like it's going to be an Auburn crowd. And so, and you also have the Nashville crowd who will come down and see it. Like Auburn is starting to populate certain areas of the Southeast that I think the teams that, Atlanta, for instance, and Nashville and Birmingham and Huntsville, like it's time to, like, you can go schedule those type of games in the out of conference. So I think it's genius. I think it's going to be awesome. I think the cheapest ticket right now there's not one. Like it's more.
Where are they playing? Are they playing in UAH's arena or?
Yeah, the Huntsville arena where the hockey team plays.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Matt, what was that note you just put? That was interesting.
Well, just that Ryan is right on the money. Obviously, North Alabama is a huge part of the Auburn alumni base. That I was looking at tickets; those sold right away. It's a small venue, and it is the cheapest ticket to get in the door for that game on the secondary sites right now is more expensive than the cheapest ticket to go to Auburn, Indiana, in Atlanta.
And that's two huge fan bases. Even though that's a big arena in Atlanta comparatively, that's two big fan bases with two, and Auburn's got a lot of them in Atlanta. So that's really interesting. And Chris Thomas in the chat, which we love having people live now, and hopefully we'll have more and more now that people know we'll be there after every game. But Chris Thomas says, our schedule never wows other fans, but it really helps us with advanced metrics. Very few Q4 games. So true. We've been talking about it on the pod for a while now. They do a really good job of keeping that basement pretty high. So I love that we're doing the big fun ones now, though.
Yeah, and Matt made a great point earlier. That's why when things got a little hairy there at the end of the year last year, it was never a question or a doubt that we would not make the tournament, just due to the fact that we had so many opponents in that we didn't have any Q4, Q3, hardly any Q2 losses. Like it was like the way they schedule is perfect in that sense of like, it sets you up. And the fact that every year it seems that they get conference champions from the year before or from 2 years before, or, hey, they're about to really step up their game. Like I don't know how they do it, but it's fascinating and it's genius the way they schedule.
I don't know if y'all recall, we had no big wins last year until late in the season, like 0. And the reason that was the reason that didn't kill us is because of how strong and deep the schedule was. It's not as much about, obviously you want Q1 wins, right? And that Tennessee game was huge to kind of solidify our spot there at the end. But yeah, it's just for those of us who have been watching this nerdy metrics stuff for 2 decades, 3 decades, we used to be awful because the old thinking is if we have an easy non-conference schedule, then we'll win more games and maybe we can get to 20 wins and try to make the tournament. You know what happened every year? We lost 4 non-conference games and they were against terrible teams and it sunk us, including the one year I was there in 2009 when we made the NIT. We went 24-12. We went 10-6 in the SEC. We didn't get in. You know why? Because our out-of-conference schedule was terrible and we lost to 2 or 3 really bad teams.
Well, let's talk about our conference schedule.
I actually want to skip conference altogether, if that's okay. I think we did this last year. You just get so far ahead. I would say it briefly, Matt, but I think
seconds.
Matt, tell me the high picture of like the double who we play and all that.
Exactly. Yeah. I just think this is so important for people. My favorite day in the off season is when they announce the SEC schedule of who you're playing and where.
Because we'll do a preseason SEC pod too, like we did last year, and things will be so different by then. Yeah.
Just saying, the teams we play twice. Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, those are every year. The 2 that are added this year, Mississippi State, who's going to be pretty good, and Vanderbilt. So not terrible. Teams we only play once at home, Kentucky, Texas A&M, South Carolina, LSU. Teams we only play once on the road, Tennessee, Arkansas, Florida, Missouri. That's kind of tough. I just like giving that out. The biggest thing to me is that Mississippi State and Vandy are the 2 teams we're playing twice, in addition to our normal rotation of Georgia, Ole Miss, and Alabama. Ole Miss will obviously be interesting because of the Flanagan factor, and getting them home and away will be interesting.
We're hitting up the 2 best outside of Auburn clubs, the New York City Auburn Club and the Nashville Auburn Club. I love that we get to play in Vandy all the time. I love that the SEC championship tournament is there. I think that's one of the most underrated college sports events out there. And I think it's only going to keep growing as more talent in the SEC. The game
So I
I
think-
want to play next.
Hang on real quick. I just wanted, before we go, because there is one big thing that did happen in the offseason. Tolu Smith. We don't know how much time he's going to miss, and having to play did you just say Mississippi State is one of the teams you have to play twice? Yeah. That's going to be huge. Tolu Smith ate us up last year. He's a fantastic offensive guy. He's one of Mississippi State's best players. He was part of what powered them to the big dance last year. And if he does not play this season, that means we're in really good shape for at least 2 conference wins from the state of Mississippi.
I want to play this game that was quite controversial last year. And it led a lot of great discussion, and it led to a lot of joking. And we talked about these predictions the entire season. And some of them were Nostradamus-like, and some of them were so dumb. So I think it's fun to play this game because it sets the expectations, and we'll talk about, just like last year, just what I was talking about with Chance Wester and Johan and what all we thought about those guys. Ben's big thing last year was he chose that he thought Trey would be starting at point guard at the end of the year over Wendell. And we thought that was just blew our mind. Couldn't believe he chose that, blah, blah, blah. By the end of the year, Ben was on it. Now, Wendell ended up starting that last game, but it was like there was a chance they might throw that in there. And Trey was on fire at the end. So I want to play this game. And I'm going to start, I think, with the most confident positions, and then we'll move backwards. I'll point you guys out and you say your opinion. Feel free to elaborate if you want. We'll start with the center position because I think that's the strongest one. Our competitors are Jonai Broom and Dylan Cardwell. And the game is who will be starting in that role at the last SEC game of the year. Go. Matt, go.
We're an all SEC player.
All SEC?
He is preseason. He was last year.
Will he finish it off that way?
I hope so.
Ben?
I'm going to go with do it all, Janai Broom. we love you, Dylan.
Ryan?
JB easily.
Easy. That's an easy one. I think the biggest question here for me, maybe to make this one a little interesting without having to take too long, will Jonai Broom hit above 35% from 3? Or how about this? 30% from 3. Will Jonai hit above 30% from 3? Matt? Or whoever feels good about it.
I think it's possible. I really do.
Come on, give me a yes or no. Give me a yes or no.
If you remember last year's 3-point percentages, I'm probably going to maybe lean yes.
Because that's the big move for him, right?
The more interesting question for Janai is he going to hit above 80% of his free throws? I know I'm the free throw guy, but Janai is only going to take maybe 1 to 2 3-point shots a game. I don't think he's asked to do that in our offense. So I think, I think just like last year, I think he could probably hit a decent clip of those. By the end of the year, I believe Janai was shooting above 30%. He was one of our better 3-point shooters because he only shot a couple a game. And, I think the Vanderbilt game, he hit like 2. He was like 2 of 2. So that's
the reason I asked is because there was a lot of discussion at the end of the year when he was trying out for the NBA that his big thing, and he started hitting a 3 or 2 at the end and it looked pretty smooth. And we were talking about if he can stretch his game out to the 3-point line, that changes a lot for him because he had some great moves underneath the basket, played some pretty good defense. But if he wants to make the NBA, he's got to be that stretch 5 that hits 3s. It's just not big enough to play down low the entire time. And so you just have to wonder if he comes into the season knowing that NBA scouts have told him that over and over again, hey, if you could start hitting some 3s, and Bruce will let them fly. He always lets them fly. So if he starts hitting them early in the Attic Conference, hits 2 a game maybe, that changes a lot. And you might see a lot of shots come up from him at that point.
That sounds like a pipe dream.
He's going to take more because, don't forget Macklemore. We've done this before. He's going to do both. He's going to be a dominant interior player. He is going to shoot more 3s. But Ben is exactly right. You saw it in the postseason. He's going to get hacked a lot, and he's got to be better at the line. Totally agree.
All right. Next up is the shooting guard position. We got KD Johnson and Denver Jones. Is anyone brave enough to pick KD Johnson? Matt?
No.
Ben?
No, again, I just think he's more valuable to you as a ball handling 2 guard coming off the bench.
Ryan?
Possible dark horse SC player of the year, Denver Jones.
Wow. All right. If things will change like crazy if Jonai Broom plays the way we think he can and Denver's like that. So, that's easy to say. If all our players are great, then we're going to be great, but there's a chance. I think the next interesting one might be point guard. Let's see. We got Trey Donaldson and the new 5-star freshman, Aiden Holloway. The battle between a guy that's got a little experience. He's more of a downhill it's a guy that can drive to the basket. He did hit some great threes last year too. Maybe a guy that's not going to shoot quite as much. I think one of you guys, maybe Ryan, was talking about how Aiden might be a scoring point guard and may not be the best assist man. So I think that'll play into it. Matt, who you think?
I actually think this is going to be really interesting. I think Trey starts the year at point guard. I think eventually, I think Aiden is going to do what Wendell did 2 years ago and come off the bench and finish games. I think if Aiden is the kind of player we think he can be as he gets more comfortable, I think you might see a situation where Trey's starting at each half and Aiden, as he earns it, finishes the halves. I also think it's worth throwing out there. I've read and heard a few times that, well, Denver could, if he needed to, also play the point. And I just wonder if Aiden, I think Aiden at the 2, whether it's this year, next year, I think like Ryan said, it's just something to keep an eye on. I hope Trey and Aiden do great, but I think Trey's going to start the year, and I'm hopeful that Aiden will be our finisher, getting that elite talent out as the season goes on.
Ben?
Yeah, I think there's a possibility that Aiden plays more overall minutes than Trey, but I just think based on the way that our lineup looks, I think Trey's going to start the whole year. I don't think we need scoring first from our point guard. I'm hoping that Bruce learned that lesson, that Wendell should have come off the bench his entire career. We would have been better for it. And I think overall, Trey has a bigger body than Aiden, not just that he's a freshman, but Trey's also 6'2" in that area. So he's got a little bit more size. And I think going down the stretch, we're going to rely a lot on our defense. Our defense won us several games last year, including the Florida game. In conference, the ability to have a body on a defender and force difficult shots. And I think we saw Trey Donaldson do that over and over and over again. So if you need a bucket, I think that's still going to be Janai all year. If you need a shot, I can imagine a situation where it's going to be Aiden, but I'm going to need to see what his defense looks like against elite SEC talent before I think that he's going to be finishing games.
Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to lean the defending route right now because I know that's a huge question mark on this team, right? It's we can score, but can we defend? And we hadn't played a game, but that's been the reports out of camp, right? So I got to go with who has been and who actually came on really good towards the end of last year. I mean, that Iowa game, I was at that game. Trey had the look of like, hey, this is my time. So I got to go with Trey, and I'm probably going to. It's gonna be fascinating because like I kind of want to say that Aiden may start the 2 at some point, and so I think I'm just gonna stick with Trey for right now.
Chris says for point guard, both are going to run the well. Starting minutes will go to the better defender, and I agree. I think we all agree a little bit here. I think it'll look very similar.
Especially against Baylor, right? I mean, that's you're playing a team who won national championship 2 games in a row. Like playing good defense in the first game of the year, I mean, that's going to help you win. So I just can't see Aiden starting game 1 unless something crazy happens in practice. Like it's going to be Trey. Now, who's going to be that person at the end of the year? I don't know.
I think it'll be interesting to see if KD and Trey or KD and Aiden are coming off at the same time. That'll be interesting because I think what we're kind of aiming at is what Wendell was 2 years ago, where Zepp was the starter and Wendell came off as that scoring part guard that you kind of wanted that little bit of jolt when you took some of your starters out and you didn't need a guy that was going to distribute quite as well. And Zepp was going to distribute. Zepp was going to run the plays and Wendell wasn't necessarily. Aiden might be a similar situation where he maybe has a higher ceiling for sure than Wendell, but he might get pushed around a little more early. He might not run the plays quite as well as Trey that's been in the system an extra year. So, but I think it'll be interesting to see Aiden and KD at the same time, 2 small guards like that, if you have them rotate at the same time.
Can I just ask y'all real quick, based on what we know now, if you think about an offense centered around Janai Broome, we saw Trey be a knockdown shooter at least for a 10-game stretch at the end of last year. What we know about Aiden is that he can shoot the lights out of the ball. So if you were choosing between 2 guys you would want on the perimeter to take some open shots out of these 3 guys, KD Johnson, Aiden Holloway and Trey Donaldson, you're picking Trey and Aiden probably over a guy like KD.
I'm picking Aiden and Denver Jones.
Well, obviously Denver. I'm just trying to think of the rotations, and like I think that's where Ryan and I are getting at, is like there is a potential for certain situations where you would potentially want both those guys on the floor, especially if we're not going to be as good on defense and we're going to lean more on our offense this year.
Maybe, but as I tried to remind you all last year, there's only one ball when you're on offense. Only one guy is going to take that shot ultimately. And I think understanding who that guy is when any given unit is on the floor is a big deal.
Well, there was only 2 guys last year who took those shots.
Fair.
I just think it's something. I think it'll be something to watch if you have to rotate Aiden and KD and the same 2 small guards like that are going to be chucking the ball up. Most likely, it'll be interesting. So we'll have to see what rotation we deal with.
I don't know. I think especially by the end of the year, and particularly in that West Virginia game when he put a lot of my doubts to silence. KD's a slasher. I don't think he thinks of himself as a shoot first guard. I think he's a drive to the basket, go through contact.
This is a good conversation. Can he start hitting shots? Because man, did it fall off last year, and it was huge that didn't happen. There's a reason why we had to go out and get Denver Jones. But like we'll see this year, that'll be something to watch. KD can change his game altogether if he just starts hitting some open threes.
KD hit 1 shot for us last year, and it was to tie it against Vanderbilt.
Honestly, after his sophomore year or his first year with Auburn, we were pretty excited for the next year of KD to see what he's going to do. A little ball energy, getting all these crazy steals, taking over the game sometimes when we really needed him to. And man, last year was really tough. And honestly, it says a lot that we're kind of like, we've barely talked about him tonight. And we're probably not going to talk that much more about him because right now, if he plays like he did last year, it won't be that huge of a factor.
I'm not standing for that KD slander. He was massive at some of the SEC games last year. Massive, especially toward the end of the year. Like,
people forget he was our best 3-point shooter the last half of the year.
Yeah. Who knows?
Right. We'll see. We'll see. I'd love to have heard his like. I mean, this is part of it. We just don't get a ton of great Auburn coverage. Not to call out our beat writers necessarily, whatever. We don't get a lot of great out of conference or off season coverage. So I really haven't heard much about KD improving this or that. Which is probably not a great sign, but also a sign that we're not getting a lot of coverage.
But also again,
they closed. Sorry. They closed a lot of people out of practice.
I have heard that actually. People talking about how they're there, but they couldn't talk about it and stuff.
But again, also you got to remember that like what we're doing in practice doesn't really matter as much as what matters against going against actual bodies and against people that are trying to resist you. I mean, like Ryan went and watched our open practice, and it was an offensive clinic. And why is that? Because you want to put on a show for the people. You want to get folks excited about what we can do. You're going to leave guys a little bit more open. You're playing against the scout team that maybe can't close as quickly off of screens, that type of thing. So we're lucky this year in our out of conference. We're going to have a couple of games early where we really get a feel for how good this team can be. If we struggle against Virginia Tech, if we struggle against Appalachian State, we're going to have to hope that Bruce can tweak some stuff. But let's talk about another slightly more interesting position. Who's ready to talk about the 4?
Well, I wanted to talk about, I think these next 2 positions are hard competitions, and there will be some conversation here, but for very different reasons. And the 3 position is Chad Baker-Mazara, Chris Moore, and Lior Berman. And this position will be who is, I mean, we love these guys. We love them, but it's who can hold their own out there at this point. And right now the leading guys is CBM, as people are going to call him, Chad Baker-Mazara, but I think there's a conversation with the other 3. So Matt?
Gonna make it more outrageous. I'm not convinced that Chaney Johnson and or Denver Jones at times may not start at the 3. So
end of the year, by then we'll know
5 guys that could play there, and I think Chad Baker-Mazara is the guy, unless Chris Moore. People forget he was actually playing pretty well in the non-conference beginning of the year last year, starting at the 3. So he is the incumbent. He is the spiritual leader of this team, probably, in terms of the kind of guy that Bruce wants to build around. You never can discount that with Bruce. I'm leaning Chad Baker-Mazara, but I probably have less faith in him than 90% of our fan base. I'm going to have to see it. I'm going to have to see the 3-point shooting at this level. I'm going to have to see that he's big enough to defend anyone on the wing. I'm very uncertain, and I think we will learn a lot early in the year. How quickly does Bruce potentially start looking at getting Chaney and Jalen on the floor at the same time, or getting KD and Denver on the floor at the same time?
Ben?
I'm going to actually side with Matt here. I expect Chris Moore, as long as he stays healthy, to start at the 3 position for us. There's only one ball on offense. You need somebody that's going to be able to play good defense. And I don't know what CBM looks like as a defender in this league. I know that for the Aztecs, at times, he looked incredibly competent as a defender. He's really long. He's really rangy. But what we ask out of our 3, particularly off the bench, is a lot. Alan Flanagan was at his most effective coming in as that 3 scoring small forward position, a guy that was going to drive. He was going to make some of those elbow cuts when Jalen was off the floor and occupy that middle space. And I don't think Chris Moore is thought of by this team as that kind of scoring guy. I think when he gets to double digits, we give him a game ball because it's like, wow, look at really taking advantage of a great matchup there. I think when you start games, what you need to do is frustrate the other team defensively and go to your strengths. So my hope is that we field a starting 5 that gets the ball to Janai Broom early and forces them to try to double him, and that frustrates their offensive set and has guys step into the windows. And that was one of the best things that we saw Chris Moore do last year. Anticipate other teams' passes, know where the offense was trying to go, and disrupt their rhythm. So I think Chris Moore, if he stays healthy, could potentially start the entire year.
Ryan?
I lean a little more towards that too. I think it's funny how we are now like we play a lot of positionless basketball now. So, I do see a lot of Chris Moore. He was starting last year and it may have started the whole year without getting hurt. And so I kind of think that he may start game 1, 2, and then it would take some sort of crazy Chad Baker Mazzara scoring at will type thing for him to take that over. Like I kind of agree with Ben on that too.
Imagine you're 18 years old, you're fresh out of college, you're a 6'10" wing guy, and you're used to just driving and dunking, and all of a sudden you've got 23-year-old Chris Moore, 225, 230 pounds, whatever he is now, standing in front of you, who has been watching film on you and knows where you want to try to drive and knows where you want to try to pass to. I think his defense as a wily veteran is just too valuable. I don't think we need scoring from the 3 in that starting position.
I love Chris Moore and Leroy Berman, but they're both non-conference guys. They do some stuff in non-conference that looks solid. They hit some shots in non-conference that look solid. And the frustrating part, because we'll see how Chad Baker Mazzara plays. He might be completely terrible and it doesn't matter. And we have to go with one of those 2 anyways, or he could look pretty decent. We're not quite sure where he's at. The annoying part is I do think Chris Moore could start. He probably will start down a conference, and he'll look fine. And we'll be talking about, hey, Chris Moore's holding his own. He's doing good. It'll be when we get to conference play and he's already locked in his starting position. And we're halfway through conference play and we're like, oh my God, Chris Moore is really killing us out there. The 6'10" wing guys or whatever figured it out by now, and they can just back him down and he's too short or he's too slow for some of the other guys. And it'll be like, well, he locked it in not a conference when it looked pretty all right. I guess this year will be slightly different, maybe because we do have so many good at conference teams that have those big players that we're playing. We're not playing as many small conference teams, but it'll be interesting. I think it's a bit of a black hole come SEC play. I think you made an amazing point, Matt. I think that we might be seeing a situation where team captain, spirit captain, guy that does all the right things, Chris Moore, starts every game, starts that last game, but you see a Chaney Johnson or somebody else playing most of the game in that position. They kind of start rotating out by the end, and by the end of the game, halfway through SEC play, it's not who's starting anymore. It's who's finishing. And Chaney Johnson or whoever else, maybe Denver Jones, maybe Kay Johnson, then we'll be talking at the end of the year about our finishing lineup. And it won't be any of those 3, I don't think. That's my prediction.
Well, and if you remember about midway through the season last year, after Chris Moore's shoulder injury, Flanagan became the guy that stayed on the floor. We would take the rest of our starting 4 out, and Flanagan was the starter that stayed in with the backups. I don't think we're in any danger of seeing that this year unless CBM makes a huge leap and really becomes the guy. But I see it being the black hole of the offense this year, the way the 2-guard was last year.
I would just add, Bruce, I trust Bruce when he talks in public, and he's already pretty much gone public saying that we're 10 deep, which implies that Chris Moore, Chad Baker Mazzara are going to play. And at least in non-conference, it's going to be that traditional two deep at every position, with Lior as kind of an extra guy and AD Scott as the 3rd center, which I love to have, by the way.
And to defend Lior slander just a little bit, Jackson's beef with him in conference play is not necessarily justified. Lior's fundamentals are incredibly sound. One-on-one, I will take Lior against a vast majority of players across the SEC. He kept his guy. He kept himself between his guy and the basket. One-on-one, it's hard to get around him. He's a big body. He's got some athleticism. The trouble comes when you start to flex and you send multiple guys his way and you have to ask him to make a lot of decisions really fast, and he becomes the focal point of the defense.
I'm a big fan of Lior. Every year he surprises us with how deep into the SEC play he's still playing, or what he hits in the SEC play, or someone gets injured. And we're just so glad that we have someone like Lior still on the roster that can hit an open shot, can play some decent defense, can absorb a foul or two. Like he's you know, he's not in the conversation as the starter at the end of the year, but the fact that this many years in for a walk-on like Lior to still be in the conversation is a big deal.
There will be situations where Chris Moore and or Lior Berman will be in positions because of their on-ball perimeter defense. So Ben is absolutely right. I think maybe that's a piece that we're going to need more than we're thinking about from that 3 position.
Last up here on the list, what an interesting discussion, because we would have never thought this coming in. D2 transfer Chaney Johnson in our 4-year starter, right? 4-year starter, or going to be a 4th-year starter. He started sophomore, junior, senior, and now his 5th-year senior year. Jalen Williams, or he might be starting. We'll see. Matt, what do you think about this matchup?
I don't think it's much of a matchup. I think Jalen Williams starts all year. I think Chaney's going to get on the floor in a lot of ways. And I think the biggest positive of the Chaney hype is Jalen was playing way too many minutes last year. He was playing 32, 34 minutes because Chris Moore was either hurt or ineffective at power forward. I hope Chaney can play the floor. I think he can. I think he's athletic enough. Clearly the coaches like him. I love having that, but I do believe Chaney's probably one of the best 6 or 7 players on our team. I believe that based on all the talk, but I think Jalen's starting. I think he's going to have another really good year, and he does have to get more consistent. And I think he'll take a baby step forward in that. I'm not saying I think he's all SEC or anything, but I do think he was better last year than he's been his whole career. I think he'll be better this year.
Ben.
Yeah, it's going to be Jalen. I think it's more likely that Chaney starts at the 3 than I think it is that he starts at the 4. I think you put Chaney Johnson at the 3, and right out of the gate, you've got a matchup nightmare. You've got an explosive guy that can really replace that Alan Flanagan hype mode. You've got somebody that you can lob it to easily inside. I mean, talk about a pick and roll nightmare if you get him in a situation where you've got Janai waiting on the underneath and you've got Chaney Johnson waiting on the wing to either take an open shot or drive through. I just think Jalen provides too much incredible defense, and I think his high basketball IQ keeps him in the starting lineup the entire year.
Ryan.
Jalen.
Sounds like we're not buying into this off-season hype that Chaney Johnson might take the starting position from Jalen. I don't think so.
We all
either.
got burned last year with the new guys. None of us are gambling on the new guys.
We'll see if he even starts with a 3. I mean, I am holding reserve for all these people, all these new guys right now. I hope Denver Jones is as good as we think. I think he's the one we most feel solid about. Matt?
Jackson, you're great at pointing this out all the time. So much of sports is a game of expectations. I think Chaney has thrilled and shocked the coaches and the players of how good he is at this level. I think Ben always points out he showed up good in that game in Neville Arena. I think that's a big part of the narrative and the talk is like, oh, Chaney's like a dude. Like we maybe thought we weren't sure, and he's going to play and he's going to be an important part of this team. So I think both can be true, right? He can be hyped and also maybe not ready to start at power forward in game 1 in the SEC.
Ryan, you were there at the practice. Maybe this will wrap up our picking the starters here. We'll hold everybody to it, by the way, just like we did all through last year. But you were at that practice. Me and Matt have talked in years past, and maybe it hasn't hit quite as often as it used to. But the body transformations we've seen from some of our guys seem to be at least one guy looks completely different almost every year. Was there a guy you saw in practice that you were like, whoa, that's so-and-so? They put on a lot of weight or gotten skinnier or what?
I mean, Lior looks pretty jacked.
Lior.
I mean, Chaney is a specimen out there. He is a dude. So I don't know. He's got a lot of power. He's got a lot of explosiveness. I think he's going to shock a lot of people with that. But I mean, those two are the pretty much like that you could that we saw. I mean, Janai and Jalen, they still look the same, but
I was kind of hoping to hear Jalen. I've been hoping every year pretty much to hear Jalen coming cut and more muscular than years past, but it is what it is.
Jalen's like the heaviest dude on the team already.
Jalen. I just feel like he's got just a little more muscle he could put on, get those rebounds, but it is what it is. He transformed a bit between his freshman and sophomore year. He's a little lankier his freshman year, I remember.
You also got to remember that when Jalen gets physical, because of how big he is, he gets officiated differently. So Jalen, that's never been his game to go and bang on the boards.
Jackson has always wanted Jalen to be this, because we saw it briefly in his freshman year, this athletic freak that's just like dunking all over people and attacking the rim. And it's just not. However, if he's not going to be that, I love that he was our most consistent 3-point shooter last year. He just has to be better in all facets, but he showed some glimpses. Hopefully he'll keep it up.
And he owned Colin Castleton to win us the Florida game.
Yep.
I'm just so excited to get basketball back in my life. This is part of like one of the more fun things I do. And I love hanging out with the guys. I can't believe I'm going to get to watch 2 games live in person in New York. I don't know if there's any other thoughts you guys want to leave with about this upcoming season, about expectations, about, I know we always talk about kind of setting your expectations at like, remember where we were 10 years ago, remember where we were pre-Bruce Pearl, and just be happy where we are. Last year was a bit frustrating from a visual standpoint, from a fan standpoint. Our offense wasn't great to watch. We weren't explosive. We grinded things out in frustrating ways. This might be a bit of reversal. Maybe our defense is more frustrating and our offense is a little more fun and explosive. But either way, just go ahead and try to do a mind experiment while you're listening to this podcast right now. Set yourself back 10 years ago. We hadn't made a tournament in 20 years. No one cared about us. No one would ever come play with us. We never had a McDonald's All-American or anybody special. And now look at us in this podcast, having something fun to do, having something fun to talk about in the winter.
Well,
Thoughts,
look,
guys?
we don't have to look back that far. I mean, last year we all sat around at the end of this pod and said, I guess Bruce is going to roll with his guys. We didn't go out and get a ton of people. We didn't make a ton of changes to the roster. We brought in guys that we'd already recruited to play. And we said, all right, we're going to see if that works. And, it didn't work out great. And so what did we do in the offseason? We were aggressive. We went after some big names. We got some big names. We missed on some others, and we found some different kinds of role players. So I think this is a great time to have some high expectations. Go in and expect this team to be a better team and expect us to compete at a high level and expect us to set another record for the number of weeks in a row that we can be ranked. Let's keep those expectations high.
Your thoughts, Ryan and Matt? Anything to leave us with?
Well, I mean, it's the age of college basketball has changed, right? Like we've gotten older, and older tends to win right now. And so, I think it's exciting because we have a great out of conference schedule. So the first game is going to be funny, right? Because we could get blown out. Like we could absolutely get the doors blown off, and the fan base just, woe is us, here we go again. Or we could win and everybody starts buying tickets to go to Phoenix for the Final Four. Like it's just, you just don't know what you're going to get out of this team and this fan base. And so they live and die by every single game. I hope that we give a little bit of patience, because this team may take a little bit of time to get used to playing together. I mean, they haven't played a real game together besides an exhibition behind closed door scrimmage type thing. But I think it's also incredible that we have the consistency of, we have the ability to go to the tournament 3 years in a row, which not a lot of teams can say. We also have a coach that's about to be with us and is the longest tenured SEC coach, I believe, which people who've had to start over and keep rebuilding, like, are either because they tanked and they're really bad, or they need a fresh start, and we're not there yet. And I don't think we'll be for a long time. And that's exciting. And that is something that I think we should be thankful for, especially now that we see the F word football going through what they're going through, right? We have consistency and we have stability. So enjoy it.
Matt,
We're going to bleep that in post, Ryan.
Go ahead.
He said the F word and then he dropped it right afterwards. It was a Lee Corso moment.
Yeah. F it.
My expectation, and this is so fun to say, is just to make the tournament. I think that's the expectation for this program at this point. It's hard to do every year. It should be celebrated every time it happens. This podcast is always going to support that. So I think that's my goal. I think that's a very reasonable goal for this team. I will say I'm something about this roster all offseason. I'm a little more bullish now than I was a few months ago, the more I've heard and read. But like we talked about earlier, it's hard to know how much of that is hype until we just see it on the floor. I have questions if this is going to be a team that's not as good defensively. Bruce has a sterling track record offensively. Like if you go back, his teams are always in the top 5 of his conference in scoring. It's kind of been a little, we've always talked since he became the coach about it doesn't always look aesthetically pleasing on offense, but it scores a lot of points and it's been fun to watch. And I think that's what made last year kind of weird, is that it just never got started. So the storyline I'm following is, okay, we got these new pieces and we have some veteran pieces. Does the offense look more like what we would expect a Bruce Pearl Auburn offense to look like? And if so, then I see the ceiling and the upside. I'm just a little more pessimistic. I really feel like we're going to be kind of honestly like where we were last year, with hopefully some better non-conference wins, perhaps a stronger strength of schedule and metrics. And I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I'm just not entering this year with warm and fuzzies about like chasing the SEC regular season title or being in the top 4 even necessary. I hope that's wrong. I hope we do. I think we should aim for that every year, like Ben said. But I just make the tournament. Let's continue to build this consistency of this program. If last year's a down year or kind of like our floor, that is a really, really good place to be. And I hope we continue to see that play out this year.
All right, guys.
24 wins. 24 wins. I'm calling it right now.
Ooh. Thanks for coming, everybody. It's fun to have this YouTube live chat situation going on. We'll have hopefully more and more people show up as we do postseason or post-game analysis every time. That's one of our big things. Every game, for the most part, we have been on directly afterwards. We all have a life, so we'll see if we haven't missed a single post game in 2 seasons of doing this podcast, because 3rd coming up, but we all got a life. We'll see if we miss 1 or 2 this year. Don't hate us if we do. But we will be on YouTube this year live, which I think will be a great factor that we can all come in. So check that out. Leave some reviews. Tell your friends before the season starts. We can all have a big fun time. Let us know if you have any thoughts. And thanks for coming. And War Eagle, guys. Cool. We're still live. Guys, thanks for coming live. If you have anything you want to throw in the chat real quick for us, let us know. I don't know what we expect from chat or from YouTube live in the coming year. I think it'll hopefully grow. It's only the 2nd time we've done this. Hopefully when people know to show up after every game, it'll be a bigger deal, but we appreciate everyone that came. So
I think once we start to play, we'll definitely see a little bit more interest in it.
And hopefully we'll do this maybe too with, if people show up to the live, we might stay on an extra couple minutes for the live people, or start a couple minutes early for the live people or something, give people a little extra something. Doesn't look like anybody's coming into the chat necessarily. I know it's got a little delay, but thanks, guys. We'll stop the live also. This will be posted tonight. So you might see it if you got your notification on. You might see a couple more lives pop up. That's just us practicing. We want to get out all the guys on it. So thanks, guys.